Welcome back to another episode of Why Do I Do That? So today's question is, why do I get on the attack whenever talking with a certain person or whenever around a certain person? And this is also a really common thing that happens with my clients. They'll be like, I just can't stand or I can't be around this one friend in the friendship group, or my mother-in-law is a huge one. Mother-in-laws can be very triggering, and there is so many reasons to this. And I wanted to preface today by saying you can't like everyone and you're never going to get along with everyone. And it's probably not normal to like everybody and to get along with everybody. I think as human beings, there's so many different people in the world with different backgrounds and experiences and belief systems that we're just not going to get along with everybody, and that's so fine. But where it becomes a problem is when there's people that kind of have to be in your life, whether it's a family member or a member of your partner's family, or whether it's a friend that's in a friendship group. Like I said, there are going to be people who are in your life that you can't necessarily just distance yourself from or let go of. And I mean, you definitely can. That is an option. But for some people, that's not really what they want. They just want to be able to feel calm and accepting when around this person and to not feel like they're constantly on the attack. And I can definitely relate to this with certain people in my life. There are certain people who everything that they say, I just don't agree with. And everything that they say just pisses me off. And everything that they say, I just want to argue back with. And there are also people who I feel like have been similar to me, where they don't agree. They just disagree with everything that I say. And they are on the attack with everything that I say. And again, super common with clients. I've spoken to some of my family members about this. I feel like we've all experienced this to some degree. So it is, first of all, normal. But if we want to really break it down, where it could be coming from, why it's happening, but also how to deal with it, that's what we're in for today. So the first question I often ask my clients and myself, and it's a juicy one and there's always something in it, is, who do they remind you of? Especially if it's like a friend or if it's a person who's sort of new to your life, not like a family member that's been with you forever. Who do they remind you of? And so they'll often be a person in your family or in your childhood who this person reminds you of. And not necessarily what they look like or the things that they're saying, but the way that they communicate, the energy that they give off, and the way that they make you feel. Who does that remind you of? How do they, when do you remember feeling that certain way around somebody in your childhood? And I've had so many examples where there's people who are not the same as my father. And if you don't know my life story, you can listen to that in episode 1. But they're not the same as my father, but they feel the same. So they feel uncomfortable, they feel threatening, I feel uneasy around them, and being around them reminds me of being around him. So you want to look first into who they remind you of, so that then you can unpack, are they actually really similar? And is there actually merit here in the way that I'm feeling? And does this person actually need to be cut out of my life and removed from my life? Or are they reminding me and triggering me because of these certain little things that I can heal and work on so that I can tolerate having this person in my life? Is it just a couple of little things, or is this person actually toxic? So asking yourself who they remind you of is probably the first little self-inquiry that you can do. The second part is, what are they bringing out in you? So a lot of the time we don't like people because of what they bring out in us. So we might want to be this calm, chill, relaxed person, but when we're around this person, they're bringing out this hypersensitive, agitated version of ourselves that we don't like. And so there's, in that, if you look at what version of you they're bringing out, or what part of you they're bringing out, so an overprotective part, a angry part, a bitchy part, a whatever it is, if you can identify the part that they're bringing out in you, you can start to heal and work with that part so that when you're around that person, you're not triggered by them and they don't affect you anymore. And I have seen this happen in real time. I've done this on myself and thousands of clients where they just don't have a reaction to that person anymore. They're able to be around them because they've healed the part in them that was being activated by this person. And this part of themselves that they didn't like, they've become friends with. They've healed. They've looked at that part, and that part no longer comes out when they're around that person. They can continue to be themselves. And I feel like Ram Dass, the spiritual guru teacher, talks about this, and he's like, anyone can be enlightened in the mountains when they're meditating and when they're surrounded by people who are not activating them. But I challenge any spiritual person to go home and have Christmas lunch with their family and not get activated. And it's so true. So there's people who bring out these parts in you, and until you heal those parts in you, they're going to keep being activated and keep being brought up. So instead of just, there's a phase that people go through in their healing journey where they're like snip, 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 and they're cutting everyone out. And I have so many clients, it's actually funny, who send me reels of super popular reels saying, I think I healed too much, I don't like anyone. And I respond to them, that's not what happens when you heal too much. When you heal too much, you love everyone. And it's a stage that we go through where we're like, I don't like this person and they're toxic. And when we're like super self-aware, we also become aware of other people's problems and patterns and toxic traits. And because they're not dealing with it, we get frustrated. But that is a stage that we need to go through and come out the other side and go, they're them, that's their life, that's their journey. I'm just going to love them where they're at. And I'm going to keep working on myself to not be triggered by that person and their lack of healing or their lack of awareness or their lack of empathy or whatever it is. And so it's another opportunity for us to go inward and to look at the parts that are being activated by the person that's not doing the work and what they're bringing out in you. So it's probably one of my favorite things to do, because when I do get activated by someone, I'm like, ooh, like now it's kind of like, oh, why is this happening? Like what button is that person poking? Because it's pretty hard to poke my buttons now. So if someone's able to do it, I have to look at, oh, okay, where's that coming from? What is it that they're doing? What part of me is coming out? What are they bringing out in me that I don't like? And how can I work with that part to feel more myself around that person? So we're looking at like what's here, what's being brought up. The next part to this is that there's often a part that is, there's this saying, my perception of you is a reflection of me and your perception of me is a reflection of you. And so it's like, is there something in that person, not so much that's bringing out a part in you that you don't like, but maybe a part that you're not willing to express? And this is like the bottom line of shadow work. Is that person, in your perspective, loud and obnoxious, but really there's a part of you that wants to be loud and speak up and that you've suppressed because you've told yourself, I'm a quiet person, or those sorts of people are annoying, or you've created this narrative around that type of person that you've pushed that part of you so far down. And we see this most commonly with people that are really confident, really loud. People perceive other people to be greedy. If you see someone that makes a lot of money, we can have people that have this perception of like, oh, that person triggers me. All they care about is money. They're so greedy. But there's a part of us that wants that and wants what they have and wants to be a little bit more greedy and not so self-sacrificing. And so there's so much information. And I think that's where we need to be way more curious instead of being on the attack. Because the question is, why do I get on the attack around certain people? If we can move out of the attack and we can move into curiosity. Why am I doing this? Who do they remind me of? What parts am I suppressing? What do I want to be more like, less like? What are they bringing out in me? Those are all the sorts of things that come from a curiosity mindset. So the other thing is, if we go back to like who they remind me of in this like past, I'm reminding you of somebody who you have trauma with, there's going to be a threat. And so one of the questions that I ask myself is, if there's someone that I'm always on the attack with and always on the defense with, or vice versa, they're like that with me, it's like, what's the threat? Because that behavior is a protective behavior. And when there's a protective behavior, there's a threat. And so I would again get really curious and journal around like, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the worst thing that this person could say to me? What's the reason why I feel like I need to be defensive? What would happen if I wasn't on the attack around this person? If I just loved them stupid and I opened my heart and I took all my walls down and I stopped being on the attack with this person and I stopped fighting back and I just loved their socks off, what would happen? What could happen? And a lot of the time it's like, well, I'd keep attacking me and then I'd be weak. And then, they have a belief that they're weak and they're overextending themselves or overexpressing this attacking part because they feel like they're weak. And this is often the case with beliefs. If we have a belief that we're weak, we will do everything that we can to prove that we're not. And we'll put ourselves into situations that feel threatening or that feel too much for our nervous system because we're like, no, I'm strong, I can do this. And we push ourselves to try and prove that it's not true. And eventually we break and then we end up burnout and then we go, fuck, I am weak. And it's just this cycle where we keep proving it true, but we're trying to prove that it's not true. It's just this like push and pull, so tiring. So if we look at what the threat is, what threat does this person pose? And we start to break it down. We can look at, is it actually true? Is it actually true? Like, can they actually harm me if I brought my guard down? If they can, then definitely that's a scenario where you'd be removing that person from your life. But if the threat is more of an internal kind of personality, if it feels more like it's about you and it's not actually a life-threatening or threatening situation, you can start to look at, okay, the threat is that if I bring my walls down, that person will walk all over me. And so then I would be like, well, when have people walked all over you in the past? And most of the time they go, my whole life. And so it's not really about this person in this situation. It's about this pattern that they have where they can't speak up. So the work there would be, okay, instead of going on the attack, how do you calmly and gently speak up in those situations in a really strong way? And so I'd work with them around the beliefs of I can't speak up. It's not safe to speak up. I'm weak. And all of those beliefs, we would remove those in their subconscious mind. We would replace them and with beliefs like, I can speak. I know how to speak up. It's safe to speak up. I'm strong enough to speak up. My opinions are accepted. Different beliefs that once they've landed in their subconscious, they will naturally be able to go, actually, I don't agree with that. Totally understand what you're saying, but I don't agree with that. This is how I see it. And instead of being like, well, that's not right, and snapping and being reactive, they're able to be calm and regulated. So in that sentence, nervous system work has to come into it too. But they're able to be calm and regulated and communicate clearly. And that comes from being able to break down what the threat is, if it's true, and going through those layers. Also, one of my favorite ways to respond is a girlfriend and I a while ago talked about this subject exactly. And we talked about how, especially with ex-partners, it can be this attacking relationship where there's blame and there's attacks in every conversation. Well, that's not what I said and that's not what happened. And well, you said this and you did that. And there can be this kind of back and forth. And we came up with this term, which is essentially like the dumb response or like the airhead response. And what it is if you know that there is somebody who you're always on the attack with or they're always on the attack with you and you've got this butting head situation, we use this airhead response, which is essentially instead of reacting and responding from the attack, you just play dumb. And it sounds crazy. It sounds like the weirdest advice. But if someone's saying to you, you did this and you did that and blah, 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 and they're attacking and they're assuming, and you'd be like, what do you mean? Oh, well, I just thought, and you just kind of, and you play it dumb. It works. It works. We've tested it. We've tried it. I've talked to my clients about it. We've all done it. And once you remove yourself from the attack and you just dumb it down and you just play out this response of like, what do you mean? And it's coming from curiosity. What do you mean? Oh, I didn't realize. The amount of times I've been like, I didn't even know that. I didn't realize. And just kind of making light of it, it totally diffuses the situation. But what it also does is it puts their reaction and their response back onto them. Because if you're fighting fire with fire, it's just going to get bigger. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. Whereas if they're coming at you with fire and you're just like, what do you mean? And you're putting it back onto them and like, why did you say that? And it's just, really curious, it really diffuses it. But it sounds like gaslighting, but it's just, you're never saying it's not true or what they're feeling isn't true, but it's just playing it down and being curious and asking questions and just diffusing the situation with just a nothing response. Because at the end of the day, some people just want to fight you and some people just want to attack and they want to get their bad mood out on you. And if you are constantly fighting that fire with fire, it's just going to get worse. And it really does diffuse the situation. So I implore you, if you have a person who is constantly attacking and constantly starting fights in your life, who you just feel like they're always on the attack, see if you can just hold and give this response of lightness, of curiosity. So I hope this has helped some of you. If you struggle with someone specifically and you really, really can't get past it, I have a great technique. It's called a forgiveness technique. And again, it's wild. I have so many clients who we do this forgiveness technique. There can be somebody that they have hated for their entire life, like a family member, and we do this forgiveness technique in their subconscious, energetically, all the things in session, and they come back to me and say, I actually can't believe it. Like, I saw them on the weekend, I gave them a hug. I said, I had a conversation with them, I didn't feel anything. Really, really powerful technique, really helpful. But I would say, try these responses first. Try to diffuse it. Try to take yourself out of the attack and just into curiosity. Try to dig into what parts they're bringing up, who they remind you of, all of those things before this. If you want to do the forgiveness technique, if you want a little bit of help, I'm always here. You can book a one-on-one session with me. If you know somebody who needs to hear this episode, please send it on to them, and thank you for listening.